Choip, choip, choip. Choip, choip, choip.
You know, for a game called Overgrowth, the world's vegetation is awfully under control. Well, it's a world populated by lean humanoid rabbits, so maybe they chew it to an appropriate height. Especially since their metabolisms need the fuel to perform amazing acrobatic jumps and perform these feats. Yes, that's what I call kicking. Welcome to this world that is effectively Watership Down with martial arts. It also has dogs, cats, rats, and wolves. And in the main story, the rabbits get enslaved by the cats, and it's up to our bunny hero to take on all comers, to stop them and find some peace. By, you know, brutalizing people with kitchen knives and ferociously beating people with sticks. Bunny bones break, dogs die, rats writhe, cats claw, and wolves are, well, super mutants. The game's a third-person brawler in case that wasn't obvious, and there's no health bar, health resets at the start of each new level, there's no breaking a crate to pick up a restorative carrot, and no need to go, "What's up, doc?" And the levels are small with generally small amounts of enemies, usually 3 to 4. Short bursts of action. Lovely, brutal action. If you're on and get a few good hits in, isolate them from one another, sometimes they can crumple. But other times you're off. They have weapons. Swords can be very powerful. I'm pretty sure that only hit my foot. Or the enemies can be in groups, where they can deal some real pain and perform a quality initiation. So the key to victory is isolating enemies and killing them quickly. Finishing them off when wedged into a corner, or perhaps the brawling gives way to stealth. The brutality translates wonderfully to this section of gameplay, and it is fun, but very simple compared to the brawling. I mean, the AI isn't amazing. Sometimes they'll call help, sort of, but at best when in short proximity to one another, I think. Their sightlines ultimately rule the day. But sometimes they're easy to lure. But it's fast in that there's an opportunity to take out an enemy and make the rest of the fight easier, at the very least. And it gives a change of pace from all the beating. And if all else fails, run away and use a jumping double kick. Sometimes you can one-shot someone like this. Maybe a bit cheap, but I'm outnumbered here. Brawling itself is brilliant. Fun if the sometimes unrealistic physics make for some almost grimly realistic impacts. Fast and furious, I've never seen impacts employed in this way, where you can collide with surfaces, and for instance die by hitting your head against a rock. You can even incorrectly land yourself to death from your own low-height jump. You can use those rolls in the air to land on your feet like a cat. Although in this game it doesn't seem like the average cat is as nimble as us lagomorphs. Yet they're not the ones being forced into arena combat and presumably thereafter the stew pot. If you don't adjust, you will hurt yourself. And the system isn't just visceral, but it's fun too, because you feel very mobile and movement feels quite responsive, and it can make some attacks be surprisingly effective and make it seem more like a martial arts sequence in a movie. When unarmed, you try and get through defenses using your strikes combined with your directional input and orientation. Well, that's what they say you do. Honestly, I was mostly flailing about. You can roundhouse in both directions, punch, knee, straight kick, crouch, and you can sweep the leg in the trippy way, not the Cobra Kai way. And lastly, you can counter throw people and disarm them. But I rarely bothered. These moves are quite finicky, especially disarming someone. So you do have a nice range of movement, but I only really started noticing the finer nuances later on. So as mentioned, for me it was more about controlling space. I mean, who needs nuances on levels where swords aren't hard to get? Lastly, on the gameplay front, there's some platforming, wall running and wall jumps. Not the most fine-tuned, responsive thing. This is a rather floaty jump after all, but it's fun, makes great use of the impact system, and it's good enough to break up the fighting segments. Plus some deaths are funny. Great gameplay. The impact system is probably the game's main draw, but it does also have very good visuals. You can see the game's limitations at times. You're a dog talking to a door. I mean, the rabbits look great in all their lanky, dour glory, but sometimes the cats can't help but look like sphinxes. Some areas feel empty and barren, a tad grungy, especially at the implied edges of the map. Maybe there's some texture issues, plus some questionable decor choices. But some areas look downright gorgeous, especially since this game really knows how to play with lighting. It doesn't really have animated cutscenes, as their movement animations are very jerky from line to line, with a noticeably small selection of gestures to choose from. A facepalm in this situation? But starting out to a view like this makes what you're fighting for feel a whole lot more worthwhile, and some of the game's visual touches don't feel as out of place as you would expect. That's not the kind of dog I would have chosen to be a tough humanoid bruiser, but alright. And yes, I get it. A rabbit's eyes are on the sides, plus their hoodie will look like this. Cool. I mean, it's questionable because supposedly a lot of heat escaped from the ears, but still cool. And musically it's good too. Sinister snares, ram-hoed in the darkness, and even that beauteous locale we saw just now. Ooh, that track had some nice chanting accents too. There's also actiony, tense percussion. And the woodwinds both caustic and sad. All in all, it scores a grim world. While this track is serene, combined with the world, it's a bit hopeless. Which can be a lovely feeling to wallow in. Not a lot of tracks though, and no voice acting, so you have to read. But pleasantly, sometimes you hear animal noises. And to me it's incredible to finally know what a rabbit sounds like. Story-wise, it's okay. Turner is bloodthirsty, stoic, and angry. Maybe dead inside? The Cat Empire is decadent, go get him. Some load screens have quotes that flesh out the story a bit. Dialogue feels a tad emotionless because of the quick transitions between lines, and the fast associated animations. Even if you're trying to savor it, it may feel a bit rushed, and in turn it kind of encourages speeding through it, especially since it was a bit more instructional than emotional. There is more than one campaign included though, that tells a different story in the established world. Lugaru, which is based off of the game this is sort of a sequel to, that story is a bit more emotional. Also a revenge story, followed by Therium 2, which is in the same world if quite far removed. It also involves a bit more science or magic or something. This story deals in a different rabbit-cat conflict, but interestingly it has multiple routes you can follow, with different levels and endings. Unexpected but nice. Still quite instructional, more anger, sometimes it can even feel stilted. You keep getting more lore, but you don't care that much about it. And lastly, we have Drika's story, which I believe follows Therium, which is the most interesting and emotionally affecting in my opinion, following her slow acceptance of the cruelty of the world. Once again, more caustic beauty. If depression's your bag, not exactly the game's draw, but it's something. These multiple campaigns do amplify a problem, or maybe they're mainly responsible for it. This game feels quite unrefined, because at the very least Therium and Drika's story, seemingly the last two to be made, are and feel like mods. And while they do add some nice content, the cracks in the facade are a bit more visible here. Take for instance Therium's multiple path system, conveniently named Path A and B. And C, available on one level only, doesn't seem to be accessible at all. Maybe it's part of another mod, or it was planned but never added. Plus it has the odd glitch, those jerky transitions. Sometimes they employ obviously strange asset usage. As mentioned earlier, apparently this prison doubles as a warehouse. It's a fairly short game, as all 4 campaigns together took me about 11 hours to complete, which is actually kinda short for the genre, although maybe it's a bit unfair to compare it to something like Yakuza. But still, to compare it to something like Shenmue or Devil May Cry, I feel fine about that. And it is cheap on Steam, 185 Rand full price, 74 Rand on sale. That's 6 Rand 73 per hour of gameplay, which isn't great, maybe it's even bad. I do think eventually it will go on a better sale, and take a little bit of the sting out of it, but until then, this is what you're working with. But I believe since I bought it, they've started throwing in a free copy of the game Receiver. I'm not sure if this is new, because I bought Receiver. I'm guessing before I bought this. So maybe you can add that to your hour total. It only kept me busy about 5 hours in total, though, and I think I may have really pushed myself to get more out of it. But if you can get that kind of playtime out of it, the price gets upgraded to 4 Rand 63 per hour of gameplay. Just a warning though, this is quite a different game, and I believe it's quite difficult to truly complete it, although it does have its merits. And its download size is quite big, as it takes up 19.82 gigabytes on the hard drive. And on the Warhorse, it's not the easiest to run, but I believe you do have to set the resolution down to 800 by 600, have everything be windowed, and even then, during combat, you might get between late 20s and early 40s frames per second. It was fairly playable actually, as annoying as it was to play it on such a small window and see my Steam library in the background, and obviously graphically it took a hit. And once during the Warhorse test, I tried the arena mode, that's also kind of like an experimental mod that's included in the game, and it crashed. That may have been the mod, but during a way earlier test, I seem to remember something about the game not even wanting to open the main story. So here are the system requirements. You're going to need something stronger than the Warhorse to play this. Hopefully nothing too much stronger. As said, the windowed mode had its smoothness, sort of, and stereotypically, I'd argue it's kid-friendly. Sure it's grim. Okay, quite grim. But I like to think that some kids can handle it, just like some kids can handle Watership Down. The blood is real thick, almost cartoony, after all. But on the other hand, they really go heavily into cats enslaving the rabbits and feeling they're the superior species. Plus there was one scene where this one dog maybe implied that they raped someone. Plus on Driko's story, sodomy is considered a crime, if that's how they meant it. The game has pretty good visuals, the small level size, and the gameplay focus, meaning you're not going to explore much of it. If there are some noticeable limitations, such as lifelessness, maybe texture issues for both the terrain and animals. Some places look grungy, others look gorgeous. But it has great animal designs and uses light very well. Helps create the dark atmosphere. It has good music, drummy and strummy, that go from sinister to tranquil, but not exactly happy tranquil, depressing tranquil. Not many tracks either. The music is probably the most responsible for the dark atmosphere. It has great fast combat, the small level size, and the gameplay focus, meaning you're not going to explore much of it, with a lovely kind of realistic collision system, where collisions with surfaces damage you too. Very brutal, natural, in spite of the ragdolling extremes. And you have nice arm and leg control, if you actually have the skills to use it properly. I mean, honestly, mostly I was just flailing around. Usually went for weapons because they were quite strong, although sometimes unarmed is better. And sometimes when outnumbered, I would just run the opposite direction, then jump back into the group for a jackrabbit kick. Sometimes it can be hard to win and not use cheap moves, especially when outnumbered. Also, there's a nice quick approach to campaigns. Few enemies per level, sometimes you're done very quickly, and then it very quickly cuts to the next level. So it's fast-paced and stimulating. Also, it has decent stealth gameplay, still brutal, but the level design isn't really focused on it, nor is the AI's abilities to counteract your stealth, so it feels less fun to combat. Platforming is also decent, feels fun, makes good use of the impact system, funny deaths, if it can be a bit finicky at times. On the maybe side, the story isn't great for the most part. The quick cuts between who's talking, combined with the limited animation and lack of voiceovers, at least in this case, does result in a lack of emotional connection. Some of the campaigns do better though, are a bit more emotionally affecting, and the dark, hopeless atmosphere is nice if you're into that sort of thing. It almost doesn't matter what they say, they're pretty doomed, you hear from the music. And Inferium does some nice things with the multiple routes approach, but I don't think it really combats the stilted feeling produced by the cutscenes. And the world building is slightly undercut by the multiple campaigns, because they do seem to be quite far removed from one another, with the exception of the main campaign and Lugaru, because they're sort of sequels of one another. So sometimes it actually makes me reconsider whether or not these take place in the same world, because say the Cat Empire isn't in charge, or relations between species are in general a bit more calm. And these issues in general may have contributed to me caring less about the lore. The world building arguably doesn't really land. This is more a place where you bash things, not somewhere where people live. And on the con side, in general, it has a feeling of unrefined because of the quick cuts. You can maybe see it in the level design. Plus there's the odd glitch, and the fact that seemingly they used mods as campaigns, even if they're good additional content. Come on, play it, and now Bugs have his Space Jam moment.
Choip, choip, choip. Choip, choip, choip.